All right, welcome to Screen Chat. I'm Neale Bastions, and this is the show where I sit around with friends and talk about film and television and all the related pop culture. And this week we are going full 15 rounds with the Italian stallion Rocky Balboa. We are talking about the Rocky Saga this week. Joining me in the blue corner, Warren Hollywood Nightingale. Warren, say hey.
Hey, so happy to be here. Hopefully I can answer that bell and come out swinging. Here we go.
I'm counting on you. And talking out of the red corner, from the mean streets of the Maples, it's Alex, the lady killer Watkinson.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm looking forward to this one going the distance.
I could not come up with a good boxing name for myself. The best I could come up with was the Tulip or the Dutch Clog.
Clog.
And this morning I thought maybe I should. I only thought of it this morning, but I should have got like a GoFundMe, and I could have hired Michael Buffer to do the introductions here today. But so be it. Next time in the next life. So yeah. Anyways, we're talking Rocky this week, the whole saga. I had a hell of a lot of fun burning through. I watched these all like in the last week again. And it was a great trip. I remembered some of them that I liked and some of them not so much, and some of them changed from what I remembered from watching them years and years ago, but I had a lot of fun. Warren?
Oh, yeah. And no, I wasn't able to get through them all, but I was, picking my shots, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly impressed with how well number one holds up. Like, just again, a film that I totally appreciate, and I know we'll get into much more conversation about that. And of course, there's highs and lows in that saga, and there's, I would say, quite a bit of a dip there, but a lot of promise coming in from the last couple of films for sure. So, looking forward to this conversation.
Alex, you burned through them too. How did you make out?
Oh, I was going to say, this is the most fun I've had doing homework since school, but my dad will probably hear this one and then chime right back in saying he never did homework in school, and that wouldn't be wrong. So, but this was just an incredible week to 2 weeks of getting back into the movies, and I'm excited to talk about them today.
Awesome. All right, well, let's jump right in. We'll go in order for now. Let's start with Rocky 1. Incredible film, nominated for multiple Academy Awards. It actually won Best Picture. It won Best Director for John Avildsen and Best Editing, and it was nominated Sylvester Stallone, Talia Shire, Burgess Meredith, and Burt Young, all nominated for acting awards. They did not win, but they were nominated, and it was also nominated for screenplay. Stallone wrote the screenplay, and also for Best Sound and Best Music, all nominees. So just a huge impact that year.
Took the Golden Globe that year, too.
Yeah, I won some Golden Globes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and it's funny to think that it was only nominated for Best Song and did not get nominated for Best Score, just because it's such an iconic one. And again, number one,
I think
holds up.
It was actually nominated for both. I think
it was nominated for Best Song, "Gonna Fly Now."
Did it not
Bill
say
Conti?
for Best Music as well? I thought it for Best Music. And Bill Conti's name was on one of the nominations.
Yeah, for "Gonna Fly Now."
Oh, okay.
But for score that year would have been what's her name? They're Giants. The one that was the dude from Psycho. He was up for 2, and
Herman.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was up for 2 that year, and then of course, the other one. But again,
it's so weird when you think about that the Rocky music, the Rocky theme. You would think that right up there with like the Jaws music.
Oscar's Best Score, 1976.
Mm-hmm.
Jaws, John Williams.
Oh.
So, but it would be 77 for the year.
Oh, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So that 76 would have been for.
Excuse me.
Was that for Jaws?
The Omen.
The Omen.
The Omen.
Oh,
Jerry
okay.
Goldsmith.
Jerry Goldsmith. There we go.
Okay.
That's who would have won.
Okay.
Yeah, Goldsmith. Yeah, that's right.
But when you think about that, like I would put the Rocky theme music right there with Jaws for pieces of music that people that have never seen these films know what that is.
Jaws, Superman.
You put that on, and it's like they have just so penetrated the zeitgeist for 40 plus years, and weird to think it didn't get a nod.
Yeah, and even Going to Fly Now, like really is such an iconic song.
Mm-hmm.
To think it lost out to, of all things, A Star Is Born, like Evergreen, which has not aged well. But Going to Fly Now, like, it's such an iconic song that you still can get mileage out of that. Playing in Rocky Balboa, they use the song, and again, it gets a lot of mileage. It is such a brilliant song. And, as we take a little deep dive into the original film, it was just a little clip first. And, of course, as they were, deciding on, in the editing process, the montage we're using for is getting a little bit longer. Hey, Bill, we need this to be a little bit longer. Can you make that happen? So the song gets a little bit longer. Hey, this sound more like a song. Let's add some lyrics. So they added some lyrics, which is absolutely brilliant. Mm-hmm. It's so efficient. Like, there's basically 9 lines in the song. It starts off with, hey, we're going to try now. It's getting hard now. And then, of course, the music is uplifting. And then it's something like getting stronger now.
Yep.
Anytime now or something like that. And then it finishes off, we're going to fly now. And, of course, that song gives me chills.
A few years ago, I used to went through a time when I would go jogging a couple times a week, and I would put on the MP3 or the iPod, and that was one of the songs on there. And so one day, right at the end of my jog, I can, see the front door of my condo. And I'm exhausted. It's hot out. And I'm like, okay, and all of a sudden it comes on. And I was charged. So then I went right past my condo and went 3 more blocks. And then the song ended. And then I almost had to crawl home because now I had nothing left. Dangerous song to come on at the end of your run. And if you're on a treadmill, not too bad. But when you're out jogging in the neighborhood, yeah.
And that's the thing about that first movie is just there's so much lightning in the bottle. Mm-hmm. To think that, it was a lower budget film.
It would have been an indie. Yeah. The budget was something like less than $1 million, and I think if you do the math or whatever, it would have been like the equivalent of $4 or $5 million today, which is still a very small budget.
And the budget for the music was $25,000, and so a lot of people passed over it, and that's including the budget to actually produce the music with an orchestra. And so to come out with that music and that song, again, it's just one way that film, there's so many things going on in that film that just the right place, right time, right environment that you just cannot plan for. It just sort of happened. And that's just one little piece.
Yeah. Another one, I think, I would say that Burgess Meredith as Mickey is probably top 3 maybe when you say the mentor character in a film, like the greatest mentor characters of all time. I'd be like Mickey, Mr. Miyagi, also directed by John Avildsen, same as Rocky, right. And Yoda, those are the mentor characters, and probably inspired. You'd have to really dig into it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mickey, if there's some Mickey in Mr. Miyagi.
Oh, I would think that's fair. Apparently during the audition, he just came in and started ad-libbing, and went to Stallone and said, "Hey, Rock, why don't you think of retiring?" And he goes, "No, I'm not." And he goes, "Well, maybe you should," which made its way into the film.
That became in the film.
Yeah. So there's so many. He really wore that character really well, and you got to think to some degree, with the success of that kind of relationship, and to have Karate Kid as another film a few years later, you would think that I would say very much so. That there's Mr. Miyagi, there is a little
the
bit
DNA
of
Mr. Miyagi's got to be a little bit of Mickey.
Yeah, because really the Karate Kid is basically Rocky with a crane kick. It really is
very similar story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Rocky, probably the first one, influenced all sort of underdog or sports type movies going forward for decades. They'd all, I think, if we looked in any of them, you'd look and find Rocky in there somewhere.
Well, and it's funny because looking into this, and Rocky's now been protected by the National Film Society for preservation. Excuse me. But it's only still the second-rated film in its genre.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, Raging Bull, Robert De Niro.
Yeah, well,
over maybe not our top, but for a boxing movie, Raging Bull still takes the cake.
I would almost say that Rocky's almost not a boxing movie. It's more like a love story that has a boxing match at the end of it.
Well, I know the director, he's trying to look at it that way. Mm-hmm. But the ties between Raging Bull and Rocky are just phenomenal. Of course, it's the same producers, I should say. Same producers for. And to a certain degree, I would think, if Rocky didn't come along and have that much success in the box office, would we have a Raging Bull? I don't know. And in that year that we were just talking about the Academy Awards, one of the films that, of course, Rocky beat out was Taxi Driver.
Well,
right. So there's all these little connections between those films, and of course, Rocky is probably a little bit more of a mainstream type film, whereas Raging Bull is maybe more of an art house
for the time.
But they're both great boxing movies in my head.
And I agree with you. I don't think you get any boxing movies. I don't think you see Cinderella Man. I don't think you see $1 Million Baby. I don't think you see a lot of that if Rocky hadn't paved the way for all of it, really. So
absolutely.
Another one of the iconic things that has embedded itself in the zeitgeist are the steps, the Rocky steps, running up the steps. That's a thing that apparently every day of the year in Philadelphia there, people come, tour buses roll up, and people from all over the world come to run those steps. Alex and I were talking earlier this week that that's on if I can be cliched and have a bucket list, someday I want to go to Philadelphia, put on a gray tracksuit, and I want to run those steps, and hopefully somebody will film me doing it so I can have that moment forever. But yeah, I would absolutely love to do that. Just the symbolism of it, of getting to the top, and at first he can't make it up, and then when he's got himself in fighting shape, you get to that top and you jump, and the way we'll talk about it as we go, but the way that it carried forward and it was repeated as a thing throughout the series, that this time he's alone, and in Rocky 2 he's got all those kids with him, so now the city's behind him and people believe in him, and then later on it's a place that they abandon it for a couple films, and then he returns to it later on in Rocky Balboa and stuff like that. So
in Creed he makes one kind of...
He does. We'll get to that later when we dig into Creed. There's a little bit more to say there on that. But yeah, running the steps is just one of the, that's just one of those things that I bet you people that don't even know it from Rocky necessarily just know that idea of running up those steps.
Well, how many films have embedded themselves into a culture of a city like Rocky has into Philadelphia? There's not another movie out there where you could walk into a town and really go, who are you? Yeah. And you walk into Philly and it's almost like, well, we're Rocky's hometown.
Yeah, and Philadelphia really does feel like a character in the film. Like it just is so rich in the setting and the background, and the blue collar and the grit and all those pieces. And of course, how Philadelphia has adopted Rocky. It has a big statue, it has those stairs, it has all these iconic.
And Sylvester Stallone says when he's walking through there, nobody calls him Sylvester.
Hey, Rock.
Hey, Rock. It's always about Rock. They want Rock's autograph. They don't want Sylvester Stallone's autograph. They want Rocky's autograph. It's just become them. It's incredible.
A further reference to the steps too. I don't know. Alex and I were talking about this before we started recording here, but the inventor of the Steadicam, Garrett Brown.
Yeah, the camera operator.
Yeah, the camera operator. Before Rocky, he was working on inventing the Steadicam, and the demonstration piece that he created using it to take it to sell to Hollywood was his girlfriend running up those steps.
Oh, really?
And then the Steadicam was used for, I think, 2 films. I forget what they are now, but it was used for 2 films before Rocky. But John Avildsen saw that presentation piece of the girl running up the steps, and that's how he got the idea for Rocky running up those steps in Philadelphia.
And again, another lightning in the bottle, completely, because as Rocky is running up those stairs, we're right beside him. So that means that Garrett Brown was running the stairs with his Steadicam.
And you couldn't have done that shot with dollies or a track or anything like that. Never, no.
And so we're actually running up with him, and as he sort of stands and turn around, we are also twisting around at the same time.
Yeah.
It is such a wonderful shot.
It is amazing.
Yeah. And even just the being in front of Rocky as he's running, as he's getting there, and everyone's kind of staring at him, and we see Philly in the background. One guy tosses an orange. But again, there's that Steadicam shot that we're seeing that we haven't seen before. That is so incredible.
And a lot of those street scenes of him jogging were shot guerrilla style. They didn't have permits, and the people there were just watching this guy run and didn't know. So a lot of those are genuine reactions, and apparently the guy throwing him the orange is just some fruit vendor seeing this idiot jogging and threw him a piece of fruit. And it's all just him like, hey, whatever. And yeah, it was not, those weren't extras. Those weren't paid extras, and those people didn't know what was going on.
It just talks to the pureness of the movie, though. And you really get, it's just, and I know we're on to the first one, but you can tie it into the whole movie. The language is always kept PG, right? There's no...
That's true.
There's no F-bombs.
I think there's one F-bomb in the entire series, and I forget where it is, and it's later on.
It's probably in Creed.
It's probably in Creed.
Yeah. I would
right?
think.
It's just... It's simple, it's basic, and you just fall in love with it. And it all starts right there in the first movie. And to your point, both of you said it. Yeah, the fight at the end is awesome, but the movie's great without the fight. leading up to
it's
it.
awesome character piece. It's awesome character writing. Everybody's fantastic. Rocco is fantastic. Talia Shire is really, really wonderful as Adrian. She really has a fantastic arc in there, being so shy and slowly being drawn out of her shell by Rocky and him. It's so sweet, him like making up jokes for her, and he just goes to the pet store to buy stuff, and he buys pets just so he can go in and talk to her every day. And
Cuff and Link.
yeah, and it doesn't, in a different context, it could come off as a guy, stalking her at work, but it doesn't. He's just so damn sweet and,
nurturing.
Yeah, and she's never threatened to buy it. And then Burgess Meredith as Mickey, we already said. And then
Burt Young.
Burt Young is really awesome in the first one. That, he is a jerk and whatever, but he's okay. Like, he feels very real. Like, he's not a villain, he's not whatever, but he's an asshole. And
Well, and to me, in some ways, he reads almost like the negative image of Rocky. Like, here's another.
here's a guy that did get beaten down by life and didn't, and he's sitting there, where's my break? Where Rocky.
Angry and bitter, and Rocky still is trying to, still trying to carve out for himself, some happiness.
Rocky's trying to make his own breaks. And Paulie's always got his hand out saying, hey, why don't you talk to, what was the guy's name? The mobster. I lost his name.
Oh, the
now.
loan shark.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to him. See if I can get your job, But, everybody in there is just fantastic.
And originally, from what I understand, in like the original draft of the script, the character of Paulie actually didn't exist. It was actually Adrian's mother.
Oh, really?
It was actually a female role.
Oh, that'd be very different.
Yeah, and and she was supposed to be overprotective and things like that. But when they started auditioning and they started rethinking things, they of course they casted him as
that.
as
And that's a
Italian
magic because
brother.
Burt Young's amazing.
Yeah, in this film, there's when you watch it, there's just so many choices that are being made that work out exponentially well. In any film, there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be things that happen, limitations to budget, and all these different things. But everything that seemed that was going on for Rocky, it just made it that much better. And one of the examples I think that really sort of endorses that is the ice skating scene. Here's a scene where it was written to be the two of them, among the crowd and them skating. However, they couldn't afford that. They
couldn't afford the extras, yeah.
Yeah, they had to cut back in the budget. So it turned out to be, them coming late on Thanksgiving night, just having to catch the guy, coming off the ice, and who says, well, okay, for $10, you guys can have 10 minutes. And so we have this wonderful scene, again, with that steady cam in front of them, but we have this wonderful scene of Rocky, just jogging beside Adrian skating, just having this real tender kind of moment. And we just see Rocky, who's this, very genuine character. And it's just a great, great, great scene.
Yeah.
And it's really almost a awkward moment for Rocky because he's not sure. Like, he just rambles through the whole skate scene. He's like, I'm not going to let there be a moment of silence. I'm going to fill the whole experience.
Yeah, it does feel like he's like, this is their first date and he's super nervous guy and he's just going to keep talking. And that's one of the best scenes in the film.
And to be honest, up at that point, there has been no score really. And I just remember watching it going, okay, we're about, I don't know how many minutes into it, and probably a good 40 minutes or so. And now the moment that they leave their apartment to go to the skating, all of a sudden there's a little bit of score. And a little bit of score after they leave to go into the apartment. And then it just sort of brings a whole other element of this sort of gritty reality to, an elevation of Rocky's character. And then, as the film picks up steam, there's more and more music gets put in.
The scene at the doorstop, like on the doorstep too, is really when Rocky's trying to convince her to come in is really, sweet too. Hey, he's hanging on the door and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then we get to the fight.
Yeah. And there's there's one scene. It still gives me chills. It's right at the end. It's right before this. I think it's the second last round. Rocky's taking a beating. Apollo finally gets him down. Right, Mick's yelling, "Down, down, stay down,
stay down, stay down."
And we see Apollo celebrating. Like so many fights before, no one's been able to go the distance with him. He finally, knocked down the Italian Stallion. And this is what he expects to be the victory. And then we see Adrian come out of the locker room. Out of the locker room. She's there, right? We see Rocky, crawling back up as Apollo turns around, and you could just see him lower his arms, and you could just read his face, like going, "Holy cow! Like, what is it going to take?" And it goes back to Adrian, the close up, and she lifts her eyes up, back to Rocky, back to him, and you just see his face. It just registers on his face, going, he knows that Rocky's not going to be defeated.
Yeah, he's
got nothing. There is no answer for
Carl Weathers' body language, and he has no dialogue there, like no line to sell it. He just doesn't get to go back to his corner and say something, whatever. And just his body language, he's like, "Jeez, what's it going to take to knock this guy and keep him down?"
Everything he had planned for that fight, he knew was done at that moment.
Yeah, he was not prepared, and he's now just like in survival mode. Like, can this clock run fast enough for me?
And from that point on, the character looks totally vulnerable. Rocky's rising to the challenge. And, we're sitting on the edge of our seats thinking, oh, my God, Rocky's about to chop down the tree. Yeah. He's going to win this. If there's just enough time for him to register, then he's going to knock him out.
I swear, even though I've seen this movie dozens of times, when I'm watching that last fight sometimes, I'm like, no, Rocky's going to win. Like, he can't lose this. I'm like, oh, yeah, right, he loses.
I screamed at the TV, hit him, Rock.
Yeah.
Like, you get so into it.
And is it not... But at the last round where he says, if you stop this, I'll kill you. To Mick?
Mick, I'm going to that last round. And we're investing in that moral victory. That's because we're getting excited because he's doing what he set out to do.
Does he even think he's going to win? Or is he just, no, he's just standing there to prove he can stand there?
Yeah. And then, exactly. He says, the night before, I just want to be standing at the end of the match. And again, there's another great scene where it's really quiet. It's Rocky by himself in the rain, looking up, seeing that they have the wrong color shorts. Again, that was a mistake.
A mistake?
Yeah. Right, and they worked into the script, but then again, there's that moment where he's just kind of looking up and he realizes, the world's against him. Like, it doesn't matter. He's not supposed to. The script is that this is not supposed to be for him. And it's just that quiet moment in the arena, like, you imagine lots of athletes have before the big games, that quiet before the storm. And he just says, all I want is to last around so that way I can prove I'm not, that bum from Palooka.
Just to explain for people that maybe don't know the reference, in the film, Rocky's shown on the big picture that they had printed up. I think he's wearing white stripes or white shorts with a red stripe.
Yeah, that's what he was wearing in the ring.
Yeah, okay, so the picture is red.
The picture,
red shorts.
And the picture has the colors reversed, and it was a production error that they couldn't afford to fix. So they just wrote a little bit of dialogue, 2 lines of dialogue that Rocky notices they've got his shorts wrong in the picture, but it was an actual production mistake made that Sly Stallone just went, well, we'll roll with it.
Yeah, and it's just another example of just elevating every little mistake. I was watching
another one. Sorry to cut you off there. Another one they made was Rocky's robe, but before he comes out, is very big on him, and that was a mistake. They made the robe too big, so then they throw in a line of going, "Do you think this robe's too baggy?" But it actually was.
Yeah, I was just watching the documentary that just got dropped on Netflix about Orson Welles and the other side of the wind. It's called "They'll Love Me When I'm Dead," and I just watched a few minutes of it. And Orson Welles is talking and saying, "You know what? The filmmaking is making the most of the mistakes that are made." And because he was talking about, during the process of the film, there's going to be largely improv in that film that he was working on. And here's a film like Rocky is capturing every little mistake and elevating it exponentially, and every little piece of cinematic fabrics available to him, it just elevates everything. It's lightning in the bottle. You just cannot capture that or plan for that. It just happens.
Yeah.
I think one of the best things about watching Rocky and the Rocky fight, and if you were to almost sum it up, you would go, you know what, Rocky might not win, but he'll never be beat. And
the fight ends. He doesn't get beaten. He just runs out of time. It ends. Because really, at the end of the day, Rocky was going to get up one more time than Apollo if that thing had kept going.
Yeah, nobody was going to beat him. Scorecard be damned, right? Punch count be damned. Nobody was going to beat him. He was going to have his own moral victory. And, we touched base on this. In today's society, that's not going to happen, right? You're going to watch so many movies where they're going to give him that win, but to be able to sit there as a true fan and enjoy Rocky's moral victory with him, I think it makes the movie all the better. I don't know if it would have gone the same way or continued off the same way if he would have won that fight.
Yeah, part of it. Yeah, today they would never let it go down that way. Today, I think studio notes would come in saying, "Hey, we want him to win," and they would absolutely probably film it both ways and then cut for whichever one to do test audiences. But I think the film is not the same if Rocky wins.
Yeah, I don't think they give audience enough credit to investing in the emotional win or the moral win, as opposed they'd want to see the the happy ending.
Yeah, I want to backtrack too and just say how awesome Carl Weathers is in here as well. I think we referenced all the other actors, and somehow I forgot Carl Weathers for a second there. His character is, I would say, probably inspired by Muhammad Ali.
Very much so.
Like his
larger
talking,
than life,
his very boisterous nature to him.
Yeah.
And bombastic. But yeah, Carl Weathers is really fantastic in here. You guys probably saw this as well, that when Carl Weathers was auditioning, he did not know Stallone was the actor. And I think he hit him or something like that. And Stallone said, hey, take it easy. And then Carl Weathers said, well, if I was auditioning with a better actor and not a stand-in, it'd be okay. And they said, no, he's the star. And Carl Weathers then said, maybe he'll get better. Just thought that's it's so awesome. And I wonder if that was him being in character and just because that's such an Apollo thing.
Yeah, that's a pretty tough thing to pull off, right? Because you're basically sitting there as the antagonist, but yet he's likable and lovable. Maybe not lovable, but definitely likable. Like he brings so much charm and to the ring and everything that he's so larger than life. I
think the only way in that he's the antagonist is because it's Rocky's story. Where if you tell this from Apollo's perspective, where he's just this great boisterous fighter or whatever, you would just like him. He's he's the Rock from WWF or something like that. He's that guy that he's arrogant, but you just like him because he's always right and because he does beat everybody until he runs into Rocky here. But yeah, no, Carl Weathers was really awesome in there. Now, do you think? Now, I don't think they intended that there was originally going to be a sequel. It doesn't end. It's not really. I think some people would tend to think, oh, he loses so that you can have the follow up where he wins. But it sure doesn't feel that way at the end to me.
No, it feels finalized.
This is the end of this thing.
Oh, completely. And
this was before the age of sequels too.
I was going to say, there was very rarely a sequel in those days. Like Godfather, maybe earlier in the 70s. French Connection, I think.
French
maybe
Connection,
too.
yeah, I was going to say.
Like there was very, very few sequels. Superman was just about to have their run of 2 films. So the sequels weren't really the thing. Plus 2, this was going to be a very small film, and its initial release was just a handful of theaters, and so there was definitely no intent. And even the dialogue, as the fight's ending,
there ain't going to be no rematch, and Rocky says, "I don't want one." Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right. He did what he did. Yo, Adrian, I did it. Yeah. I did it, or we did it.
That's part 2. He goes
at the end of part 2. He says, "I did it," but is there not a Yo Adrian moment at the end of part 1?
I think it's "I love you." They basically
you're right.
It's I love you.
Yeah,
the last line is "I love you."
Yeah, and he goes, "I love you." Yeah, exactly. To me, they've put almost boxing behind them in this sense. Now it's about their relationship, right? It's about now they get to have their life together. It was
this thing he was going to do.
Yeah,
and
he had to prove.
His real victory is that he got Adrian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting because the last time I watched it, I never caught this before, but to me, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but they almost have a parallel story because, out of all the boxers that are in Philadelphia, Apollo picks him, Balboa, because of his name, Italian Stallion. He thinks, they know that's going to really play well. And here, of all the, the girls that Rocky could fall in love with, he picks Adrian, and she's kind of quiet and things like that.
Yep.
And we see her really come out of her shell in a certain sense, certainly in the way she dresses and her comfort level with Rocky. We certainly see a growth in her character in that regard. So there's almost like this little parallel between the two of them in the sense of that they sort of just by circumstances, by the choice of something that's happened to them, we see some sort of their characters go on this sort of arc in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to challenge anybody who hasn't watched the movie in a number of years to really rewatch it.
Yeah.
I think the biggest learning for me was, I was a young lad when these movies first came out, and I first really got hooked on them. And if I was to put, my favorite, and we'll talk about that more towards the end, 1 or 2 didn't speak to me as much as say 3 or 4 did back at the time, but now watching it, dad grown up, apparently a little more mature. Yeah. Just the subtle nuances, the idle banter between Mick and Rocky. I mean, it was literally like I sat there with so many actual laugh out loud moments where I just and slap my hand on my leg or something in the middle of the movie. I can't, and then after it was done, I was like, I don't remember half of these lines. Like, where was this? Like, am I watching a remake, a re-edit? Is this a director's cut? Like, no, this has been in the movie the whole time. Where, to me, it was always a boxing movie. It was. It was a boxing movie, a boxing series, and now it has the Rocky story. It means so much more to me. So if you really haven't seen one in a long time, and you've matured a little bit or grown a little bit, go back and watch it. You got to go back and watch it.
Yeah, I would say it's one of the most essential of them to revisit.
Oh yeah, and it holds up really well.
It does.
Like there's very little in it that I would say that doesn't hold. The only thing I would say is there's some stock footage they have of people in the stands,
Crowds and stuff.
Yeah, and we're also okay. That feels like stock footage, just because our eye is a little bit more dialed in terms of what looks out of place, but the rest of it holds up extremely well.
All right, so we go from there, and then we transition to Rocky 2, and it opens literally minutes after Rocky ends. They're riding.
Well, they show the fight, right?
They recap the fight.
Yeah, first 5 minutes is the end of
Rocky 1, which they would carry on that trope throughout or carried on for most of the rest of the series, and then it's Rocky and Apollo. They're both at the hospital, and now Apollo, all of a sudden, in the 15 minutes or 20 minutes since he left the arena, has changed his tune and wants a rematch.
Wants a beatdown.
And is now mouthing off to the press and putting on a real show at the hospital about, I want this bum back in the ring. He didn't beat me. I'll beat him again. I'll prove it, whatever. And I guess Apollo all of a sudden thinks maybe if he trains harder. I think maybe, we could have let a couple weeks go before Apollo decided that. Like maybe it would have rung a little truer if he had time to listen to people saying, you didn't beat him and you just got lucky. Yeah. But where would he have heard this in the ambulance? I was watching and I'm going, we really could have waited a couple weeks on this one. That could have been a later scene.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a character like Apollo, and I think you see it throughout, 1, 2, and 3, and even a bit in 4. He's left alone in that ambulance. He might be battered and bruised, but he's left alone with his own thoughts for 10 minutes. A character like Apollo is going to get pissed off that what he thought should have been a 1 or 2 rounder ended up being a 15-round decision, and he's just going to work himself up into a frenzy.
I think he'd be mad at himself, but I think it would take longer than 25 minutes before he's to the point where he's going to publicly start challenging him and going crazy. Like I think we could have had a scene in there where maybe he goes home and he starts seeing and they have the scene later on where he's looking at all the hate mail, and it could have happened faster than that. But I was kind of like, wow, he changed his tune kind of fast, and that is sort of emblematic, or not emblematic, but that happens a lot through this film. I find people making all of a sudden snap reversals of their position from just minutes earlier. But and then Rocky does not want a rematch, and they have like a couple of lines in there when they're going to do surgery on him that they're selling that his eye is really, really injured, and he could go blind, and they're worried about it. So and then they carry on, and then eventually Apollo challenges him enough that he does take up the challenge. But I had made a couple notes here that Mickey doesn't want to train him and refuses to, and then all of a sudden, minutes later, changes, decides, okay, I will train you. Rocky took a while to build up to wanting the rematch. Apollo had to keep harassing him, and then had a public, publicity campaign against him, and then Rocky decides, okay, I'll fight him. And then as soon as it's announced, he's immediately does a complete 180, and he's back to really not wanting to fight him. And they just then spend another 25 minutes building up to him wanting to fight him. Adrian doesn't want him to fight, and she's worried about his health and about his eye, which is absolutely true. But then she goes into a coma, and then when she comes out of the coma after having the baby, all of a sudden now she's cool. She's like, win, Rocky, win. She's now with not really any motivational change. She's just all of a sudden like, go fight. And I was kind of like, we could have, could they not have thought up something there?
I know at one point they had that line. I'm not asking you to stop being a woman, so please don't ask me to stop being a man. And so, to some degree, I think there was that idea that he's got to be he's a fighter, and that's who he is. And I think that's something that throughout the series that always seems to keep coming back to, like even in the most recent films, is the idea that this is just who he is. He's painters paint, fighters fight.
I think when he goes and knocks on Apollo's door, though, in the second film, right? He's looking for that validation
in the
right
hospital there.
The should I or should I not fight him?
Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Did you give me your
best?
best?
Did you give me your best? Yes. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Like, if you would have said no, right? That was the validation. Like, to me, it's almost like the second ending of the first one, because, like he gave the best, right? So to Rock, it's like, why fight him again? He gave me it all, and this is where I finished, right? He didn't call it in, didn't dial in the fight. So I don't mind a little back and forth. Should I fight him? Should I not fight him? It's
Rocky's wasn't bad. It was just kind of like, to me, the Rocky one felt like they had built to the point and he had decided to fight him, and then it's just like they're like, oh, we have a lot more movie to go yet. We better walk that back, and then we'll have him have that journey again. But his was not as snap as everybody else's. A lot of people in there, they're like, it's one scene, and in the next scene, all of a sudden, Adrian comes out of the coma, and she's like, you know what? I changed my mind. You're right. Go fight. Like, and I was like, okay. And without, they had the scene of her, like you said, Warren, there, don't ask me to change, I don't ask you to stop being a woman, but it's like, it didn't quite sell it for me.
Yeah.
I also thought this thing was probably too long.
Yeah.
It treads a lot of the same ground as Rocky did, and it doesn't really have too much new to say, and it takes too long to say it. And I was watching, going, at some points it was dragging a little bit. I'm going, this could be 15, 20 minutes shorter.
Even when we get to the fights in the end, some of the rallies back and forth, the battles are maybe one punch, two punches too long, and Stallone actually talks about that. When he goes back to making some of his later movies, that we're not going to make the same mistakes that they made in two with some of the fight scenes. Mm-hmm. So I think time editing wise, we could have peeled that movie back a little bit.
I agree. Like it clocks in just under 2 hours, and
it's like exactly the same length as the first one.
It could easily have been 90 minutes because really what you're doing is you're setting up for we want to see that we want to see a different ending. Is essentially what that film is. Number two is we want Rocky to win, and but there's some nice moments. Like I absolutely love the moment of Mick in the chapel and just talking to him and giving him the you got to get training. But then kind of finishes off. But if we're just going to stay here, we might as well pray. That doesn't hurt. That's not going to hurt me any.
If you're going to stay here, I'm going to stay here. Yeah.
With you. Yeah. If you're going to stay here, I'll stay here with you. It's and this kind of is a really nice kind of quiet moment.
Now I kind of feel who got the short shrift here is Apollo. That I sort of thought, here's a way that you can now tell a new part of the story. And it could have actually filled out some more of that. You could have cut out some of the scenes with the other characters and have more with Apollo. And that's back again to, like, I almost wish he could have built to that wanting to challenge. And then you could have been a thing like, he gets angrier and angrier and has to escalate to goad Rocky into the fight. But, like, every time I'm watching Apollo, I'm like, oh man, Carl Weathers is really good here. And I wish there was more. And they could have shown more. Like, you could have had some scenes with him. All of a sudden now his legacy is damaged or whatever, and he's like, oh my God, like, that's his whole thing. His whole ego, his whole image and self-image is built on that he was the champ and he was undefeated and so much, and then this guy had the temerity to stand in there and go toe-to-toe with him and last the full fight.
Couple scenes of him walking down the street getting called out by what used to be his fans or something.
We have the letters, but we sure could have used more, and I would have, and the few scenes he's in, it's like Carl Weathers is swinging for the fences, and those are, like, in this one, some of my favorite scenes, and I'm like, oh man, I wish we could be with Apollo more.
Yeah, and especially after in the first one, there's that great scene where, on the TV, Rocky's being interviewed, and I think it was his manager, like the Duke was watching. Yeah, was watching, and all of a sudden started watching Rocky pound on the ribs of the meat, and also
the beef. Yeah,
and also you see him also start paying real attention. It's like, oh, we. And then of course from across the room, Apollo's like, I can't remember what he's delegating on the phone, but it's something,
something to do with the promotion.
It's making money.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a money venture.
It's nothing about the fight. Whereas this time around, for Apollo, it should be all about the fight. This is now, he steps aside from all the stuff that he was enjoying because he was the best, to now people are thinking he may not be the best. And so what does he do to now get ready for this fight, which then makes it even a bigger challenge for Rocky, because how's Rocky going to respond to now Apollo at his best?
Mm-hmm. And you talk about, you talk about Apollo, and I really like that scene with Duke when he says, this is bad for us, baby. Like, I watched you lay a beating on that man that nobody should have got up from, and he got up. Yeah. He kept coming. Like, it's bad for us, right? So there is that. There could be a little bit more of it, but I mean, it's still called Rocky 2. So
it is. It is.
Fair enough. It's not called Apollo.
It's not. But
or Rocky versus Apollo.
When watching it, that's what I'm going. Well, if I could have more of something, I'd really like more of Apollo here. I just really dug Carl Weathers in that role. I thought he really chewed on it well, and it was fantastic. And every scene he's got in this one, he's awesome in. And we could use a little more. But
even Rocky couldn't talk bad about him. Got
No.
anything derogatory to say about him?
Yeah.
Derogatory?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great.
yeah, he never said, Rocky won't get into the trash talk ever. Yeah. And obviously, at the end of this one, now it's the ending they I guess they decided they wanted. Now Rocky wins the title, and maybe there was an outcry from people after the movie, and maybe this is why Hollywood gives so many no's nowadays. That so Rocky actually does win the championship at the end of this one. Does it feel real? Should he really? Was this as good a fight as the first one?
Well, if you asked the kid when I first saw Rocky 2, I absolutely loved it. Whereas now, what I'm watching now, I almost feel like I'm still stuck in that first film. But I remember, because the first time I'd seen Rocky 2, it was in early 80s. And I remember going, just that moment of them both trying to get up and climb up, to stand before the 10 count. I was totally bought in. Whereas now, even watching these films again, I'm like, holy cow, he's taking a beating. He should not be.
No.
There's no way that anybody should be getting up from that. So it's hard to say that, so if you're asking me if I buy into it, not really, just because of the amount of punishment he's taking.
I thought
the claps were a little thunderous.
Exactly.
Yeah. I thought it took a little too long. Like they're working the slow motion gimmick, and I thought they stretched. They really pulled the taffy on that last bit too long, like really dragging to see if one was going to get up. And you're like, okay, you've pulled this out. Let's one of them get to their feet here. But I thought that was maybe a little too long. That could have been 15, 20 seconds, shorter.
Yeah.
I felt like it passed the point of where the audience knew he was going to get up, and you stop thinking, you're like, no, he's going to get up.
Yeah, especially since we have so many other Rockies from beyond that. Like, I guess maybe in the time and place in the early 80s watching this film, because you're thinking this would be the climax of probably, the two films. And
the end of the end.
The end of the end.
Yeah.
I can get how they may want to draw that out. But now, because there's, I don't know, what's it, 8 films now? Like, I think this
is going to be 8, I think.
This will be 8 with
this will be
3,
8.
2.
Yeah.
So now watching it as a series, you'd be like, let's move on here. Like, it's taking a little too long for this to happen.
Again, for me though, the fight ends up being the secondary thing. I love all the training scenes. The rooster scene.
Oh, see,
the chicken chasing scene is awesome.
The Kentucky Fried Idiot.
Yeah.
Come on,
I love the chicken chasing. Yeah,
that is awesome.
Or the sweatsuit.
Yeah, so iconic,
right? Like, it brings me luck. It brings you flies, right? Like, it's that almost that father-son relationship between Mick and Rocky that it sells too for me again. I after watching the first one and rediscovering that, to have it back again in the second one and be just as good with as many laugh out loud moments, it took me all where I needed to be in the fight, which was Rocky was this lean, mean, faster boxing machine, and now I'm like, go kick his ass, right? Like, get in there and. Yeah, a couple punches, maybe one too many, thunderous uppercuts, or 5 too many shots to the head before his hands go up, or something like that. But
I think too. We'll take this moment to say that they don't try. These are not by any means trying to be realistic. Like, they're not trying to pretend they're like a doco or something. And man, when you watch it, there are times when they would. There's no way this fight would go on in any of the films.
Oh yeah,
like, there's like
headshot after headshot.
A doctor would stop this, or somebody would just literally be dead. But it's they are movies. They're not trying to pretend they're reality. And so I think we've said all we're going to say there. Is that you guys?
I'm happy with that.
We'll just throw out that this was his first. No, it was also Stallone's first director.
Yeah, first directorial. Or did he not?
Paradise Alley.
Paradise Alley. So this was his second.
Sorry,
but his first Rocky.
First in the Rocky series.
Yeah, because they went to Evanson, who was actually supposed to be doing Saturday Night Live.
Yes.
No, Saturday Night Fever. Sorry,
Yeah.
Saturday Night Fever, which he didn't do. Banham, I think, ended up directing that. So he bowed out. He didn't do it. So Rocky, Stallone, he stepped in.
But he would direct it for the next while, whatever, up until 5 when Alvinson returned. But all right, so we'll move on. We'll pick up with Rocky 3. The series takes a big transition here. The first two, obviously made in the 70s, and when you watch them, they are very of their time. They look like they're made in the 70s, and this is now the 80s. This is 1982, and this was the first one that I remember watching. This is probably the first one I saw. I probably saw it because of Mr. T and Hulk Hogan. Didn't see it theatrically, but this is the first one I remember watching at home. And then would later on discover the originals. Knew it was a sequel, obviously, but didn't see the earlier ones until later on. But it's retro. It becomes later on. At the time, they didn't know this when they were making it, but it sure becomes like a little time capsule for
really
early
does.
80s pop culture.
Oh my God.
The introduction of
everything.
Mr. T, we see the clip of Stallone from the Muppet Show,
Yeah.
but like Mr. T, Hulk
Hulk
Hogan
Hogan,
before
yeah.
he's Hulk Hogan,
Good old Thunderlips.
exactly, and also it uses this is the movie that used Eye of the Tiger, and
Yeah.
which became Eye of the Tiger is one of the top anthems of the 80s, a song that it's one of my favorite 80s songs. And if we sat here listing off 80s songs, I'm sure we'd hit into the hundreds, but I think Eye of the Tiger is one of those songs that everybody knows.
Eye of the Tiger owns double billing in my mind to the score of the entire Rocky series with the original score.
Yeah, it really does.
I would agree, yeah.
Live up to that expectation of the music's going to be a critical piece of this experience.
And not something
Absolutely.
you could have known in advance. And then that saying, the Eye of the Tiger, I don't know if they wrote that line in the film and then the song came after and the band took influence, or if they heard the song and put the line in. But then that became that's an iconic catchphrase, Eye of the Tiger.
Eye of the Tiger. Yeah.
You got the Eye of the Tiger, and that's, I don't know, did it come from here? I don't know of any other reference to it.
I think I might have read somewhere that it was something that was in Stallone's mind for, he had it in the back of his mind forever, and he put it in the script.
But it's not from some other film.
But whether the song came first,
Even the line, did the line come from some other place? As far as I know, I think this is the birthplace of that expression, Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah, as far as I know,
Maybe it was a thing in sports thing. I don't know, but I think this is definitely where most people found out about it.
Yeah.
And that's a line that's enter the zeitgeist and is just part of our cultural thing. Do you got the Eye of the Tiger?
Yeah.
It's also the birth of the Rocky statue.
Yeah, we see the Rocky
Yeah.
statue that then became a thing around Philly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mr. T as Clubber Lang. Mr. T is a bad guy. 3 years later, he would never again be cast as a villain, but in here, he is a hardcore bad guy.
And he gets a Golden Raspberry nod for worst new star for that year.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I think in the context of this film, he's perfect.
He nailed it. You hate his guts.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and he's got his catchphrases down and everything like that, and just
Yeah, he says "pity the
shooting
fool"
up.
here. I
Yeah.
think this was the first place for "pity the
Yeah.
fool,"
Yeah.
And even though later on it became a thing we would say with love, he's it's a mean thing he's saying here.
Yeah.
There are some changes here. A lot of the characters do shift, though. Notably, does Rocky seem smarter? Does he seem all of a sudden less punchy in this film? He's talking just a little bit clearer, and he doesn't seem quite as in the first ones. First two, he's kind of this guy maybe is a little slow.
The haze has cleared a little.
Yeah.
I would say that's a fair
Did
statement.
Apollo hit him so hard that he cleared his head?
Knocked him straight. Yeah.
Well, I think throughout the whole Rocky series, this is really, the line between Rocky and Stallone is, it's pretty close. And it seems like whatever Stallone's kind of going through, we see in the Rocky series.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
in the mid-'80s, all of a sudden now that he's got quite a bit of celebrity and that idea of kind of, being swept up with it, and almost like what Apollo's weakness was in part one, now Rocky's experiencing, certainly in the sense that he's getting distracted from a lot of other things, and it has the riches and has all those other pieces, and it's maybe getting a little bit softer on that. I don't know.
Because he's into Rambo 2 at this point as well,
Yeah,
isn't he?
exactly.
Yeah,
So-
he's a franchise machine. It saves a lot of time. It's got a lot of economy here that by using an opening montage to show the past few years of Rocky's life and Clubber Lang coming up,
Yeah.
it saves screen time. And I think it's only an hour and 40 long or something. It's an hour, 139. So. And I think
Not
it
even
runs
100
quicker.
minutes.
Yeah, and I don't think it needed to be longer than that. It runs pretty good. It's always moving, which was a pickup from the last one that dragged a little bit. But Paulie is someone that this is a weird one. That Paulie has that opening scene of where he's kind of like the old Paulie, still bitter and angry and wanting a handout. And then when Rocky, he's got the two scenes, I guess. The scene where he's in the bar and then in the arcade, and then when he gets bailed out, he's giving Rocky grief and saying, "Oh, and you didn't
Looking
help
for the
me."
handout,
And, you
yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
And then Rocky says, "Do you want a job?" And then he's like, "Okay." And he's like, "All you had to do was ask." And then that's it for Paulie. It's like they threw Burt Young these two scenes, and then all of a sudden he is just transitions into being just comedy guy on the side for the rest of the film. And I'm kind of I was looking when I watched it again this week. I'm like, wow, that's disappointing. Burt Young, really, they just gave him those 2 scenes at the beginning, and then other than that, he's just there to feed the funny lines.
Yeah, and that's all he does. I mean,
for the next few films.
I don't like these people, right? Maybe they don't like you. What did I ever
what
do
did
to
I
them?
do to them?
Yeah.
And he has some great lines. I will say there are some funny lines, and Burt Young's delivering them great, and he's doing what he can with it. But they really took away any of his dramatic stuff.
Yeah.
Which is too bad.
He's the joke machine for the.
I guess they couldn't really think of what to do with him since now,
but needed him there.
Yeah, they've now transplanted from the streets, so to speak.
Yeah,
right, and the roughness of that, and I guess he's no longer working in the meatpacking plant, and
he's just living at Rocky's house and whatever. And
so it's his potential storyline is pretty tough, and. He's not going to keep on being that sort of somewhat jealous, overprotective brother. Mm-hmm. So that storyline's not really going to be there. And so I guess they don't really have a whole lot for him to do other than to be the funny guy on the side.
Yeah, and it's kind of disappointing, but that's the way it goes. Strangely, Adrian is no longer concerned about Rocky's health. In the last film, she really didn't want him to fight because of his eye. And now, subsequently, he's had 10 title defenses, and she doesn't seem to care. She's just like, yeah, no, Rocky, fight, you fight. And in fact, later on, when he needs to get motivation, when he doesn't want to fight Clubber and he doesn't want to train properly later on, it's Adrian that talks him into it, and has her whole thing about if you don't do this, you'll regret it the rest of your life, which is kind of, somewhat reversed from the last film where she's kind of like, do you really need to do this?
I almost pick up on a point, though, at some point where I almost felt like she knew about Mick cherry-picking Rocky's fights. Like, I don't know that Mick made that decision, and I'm semi-guessing, building it into my own world, but it almost felt like she knew that Mick was taking care of him, making sure, he can defend his title, this will be good, this will put some money in the bank account, but don't worry, Adrian, I'm not going to let him get pounded because I'm going to pick his fighters kind of thing. So there's a scene there where she almost alludes that she knew that Mick was he was protecting you, she says, right? Which makes it almost
you're right. And I never thought of that before.
Which almost makes it seem like she was in on it. So maybe not as concerned because she knew what was going on. Rocky wasn't just picking some guy to brawl on.
Yeah, I've never thought. Yeah, I've always just thought she took it as that she now knew because Rocky had found out, but I didn't really think on that.
Yeah, and I think Adrian's a character that you would see in the films of the 80s, where now you'd probably see a much different character of her if that story was being told today. She's a product of kind of whatever we sort of need in terms of exposition of what either motivates or whatever deters Rocky in the sidelines. Okay, and right now we want to put extra pressure on Rocky. We'll make sure that she's saying, okay, I don't want you to fight, and all those pieces. And then all of a sudden, if it doesn't really serve the story, and then she may not. And so I think it's just the unfortunate thing about female characters in the 80s is that it's not as rich as the female characters we have today. I think there's a bit of that going on where they're just kind of using her for part of the more or less just kind of extra exposition in the corner to serve whatever they're trying to get to. So that's a little bit unfortunate.
Well, and they lost her character, and
of course,
and why she no longer belongs in the later movies, right? They didn't carry on with the character development, and obviously it got to a point where they were like, "Now what do we do?" Right? So
exactly.
Yeah, you can't just keep retreading these people on the same ground.
Yeah.
I really liked, again, I guess I'm just a huge mark for Carl Weathers, but I really liked Apollo's stuff in here. Yeah. And again, I was kind of like, I don't know what I would have wanted it to be, but I kind of wish there was a little more Apollo. But, what's his... I wish we knew more... I don't quite buy his motivation for wanting to train Rocky and why all of a sudden he's retired. Like, they don't ever say... There's nothing in there like he's injured and he shouldn't fight anymore. He just, lost the fight. Like, the first time he barely beat him, and then the second time he loses to him, and there's not even a thing like... I don't know if it would play, but like, what if he'd been like, okay, Rock, I'm going to help you train to beat Clubber, but when you beat him, I want the next shot. I want another shot at you. You'll owe me that. I'll help you, and only I can help you to beat him. But, something. But I don't know what else. You
know what? I'll be honest. It almost seems like they didn't have a way to back Apollo out, so they just stay as far away from it as possible.
Yeah.
Like it. Yeah. It's just a thing. Just accept that we're going this way. Almost, I agree with you. Like you almost wonder. It's like There was no talk that he was nearing the end of his career.
No.
In the first one.
No.
You know,
there's never a mention. Yeah, he's not aging. He's not older. They play it up as
or
he's just another
injury
guy.
or
Yeah.
anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so an injury fell funny when he landed and hit the mat on that last bout. Something didn't, feel right afterwards. Something, yeah. But to your point, they don't really touch on it.
And I don't think they were planning a fourth. I
No,
thought the idea was we were going to do 3. So if they'd been thinking further out, a fourth one might have been a fourth one. Being now you got to fight Apollo again, and now maybe a different story for them would have been like, well, now we're buddies, we've bonded, we've trained together, and we're friends, and now it feels different fighting you. But that was not to be.
No, the plan was to end at 3, but it made so much money that how could you not do a fourth? It's kind of the temptation to go back to the well.
Yeah, well, it is show business, so the business is part of the show.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of fun watching it, and it does hum along pretty good. It's paced, like I said, with the shorter runtime. But I think one of the funny bits, the funny lines are really pushed more to the forefront here.
They do.
Some of the stuff, I love when he's fighting Thunderlips. When Hulk Hogan is Thunderlips, they're having the boxer versus wrestler part.
Yeah.
I love the bit like Mick saying he's a dinosaur. If you ever fought a dinosaur, they can cause a variety of damage. I just love that line.
Yeah. Why are they carrying him in?
He ain't. He's walking. Yeah. And I love the how much do you think he eats?
202 pounds.
Weighing in at 202 pounds, Rocky Balboa. I thought that line was gold. And their delivery, they've all got their comedy down. Their timing's all really great in that scene. And even Hogan, when he goes crazy, and then at the end of the fight just says, "Hey, want to have that Polaroid now?" Yeah. And he's all like, "Why'd you go so crazy?" That's the name of the game. But I thought that was super fun, that whole bit.
Yeah, there's a lot more fun in this movie. You can tell Rocky's enjoying being the champ, and it sells it really well at the beginning. To Clubber's point that he's not a real champ; he's a showpiece now, and they do a great job of it. And yeah, the movie's just fun. I love a lot of the one-liners. Again, unfortunate that Burt Young gets moved to one-line Paulie, but do you think he can swim?
Why do you think we call him The Rock? Or why
with a name like The Rock?
What do you think of Mickey dying?
Well, that was always something that was really hard.
Is that done just because for the emotional thing of it, or was his arc done, or?
I guess one thing is if you populate so many characters, what are you going to do with them all? And of course, not that they were planning on having another one, but at what point, how long would would Burgess Meredith be around for too? I guess in a certain way, and maybe everything that the character of what Mickey would actually be able to help Rocky with, that's probably pretty much done. Get him to the top and all those pieces. So
it's the third movie where they pull the "I'm not going to train you, I'll train you," right? Like
so,
we've ridden that horse.
This is the third go around. I had that in my notes too. And watching it, I kind of wondered though, like when I was watching it again recently, like the other day, it's like what they don't have what Apollo's going to do. If Apollo's no longer the opponent, what do you do with Apollo?
Exactly.
And a thing becomes, what if Apollo now becomes his friend and trains him? But you can't do that if Mickey's there. So it's kind of like, we'll have Mickey up to the first fight, and then get rid of him out of the way. So there's a reason for him to go train with Apollo, because Rocky's not going to dump Mickey. Yeah. And I was like, wow, I wonder if that was the writing thing of going.
That's what it really feels like.
Yeah.
Like it really feels like that. It's done that way.
Because I don't know if Rocky really needed the extra motivation of Mickey being dead, or it almost then becomes they're giving him a bit of a cop out that he's emotionally checked out in the fight because he's concerned about Mickey and he just gets walloped. But they've already established that he's not taking it seriously and he's just joking around through his training. So,
and if you go through 2, 3, 4, 5 and go, okay, screenplay building 101, right? Like it kind of falls in line with, okay, Adrian was in the coma. That's the big heartthrob story. She comes out, right? Okay, so what's the motivation for 3 now?
Now he needs to lose,
Clubber pushed Mickey down, basically kills Mickey, right? And so now,
and it's weird because I never thought of it like that when I watched it when I was younger. I still didn't think of it like it's like he falls down, but I don't really take it as Clubber pushes him down. But then I read, when I read on online forums, a lot of people, read it that way, going, yeah, Clubber shoved him down, and that somehow caused Mickey's heart attack.
He was showing heart problems previous, right? It just escalated it. But I mean, that if I have a little bit of a contention and slip into the real world for a while. We're at a professional boxing venue. Man, that doctor takes a long time.
It takes a hell of a long time to get a doctor for this guy.
I figured they had ambulances right after the fight on the first one.
But he just lies in the room and dies.
Yeah, so we'll just take the dramatic nature of it all and leave it at that. But that part I have to put a little bit of sense and sensibility behind me to get through that scene a little bit. So
no kidding.
And then I do enjoy the last fight. It's a lot of fun. I kind of like that Apollo gives Rocky his shorts. Here, wear my colors and stuff like that. And but Rocky takes a hell of a beating from Clubber. He just stands in front of him, and his whole plan of, here, I'm going to let him hit me and wear himself out. Or, wow, you might as well just give him a gun and let him shoot you. But somehow Rocky stands up to it, and you would think, he seemed worse off after the Apollo beatings. So... I don't know. Anything?
Yeah, no, and I'm trying to remember the way it was shot, because that was one of the ones I haven't caught this past week, and I just kind of remember that just being tenacious of just headshot after headshot after headshot.
and it only goes 3 rounds, right? He gets him in the third. He knocks. Does he knock Clubber out in the third round? Touching his mohawk and come on, champ, knock me out, and it's like he just stands there taking his punches, and Clubber's just breathing so heavy, and it's like.
Yeah, he's getting killed out there. No, he ain't. He's getting mad.
Yeah. And it's, so anyway, so we get to that, and he gets the title back, and we never hear from Clubber again, and that's it. I guess he doesn't get rematches. All right, I'm going to ring the bell right there for round 1 of this awesome conversation, but there is a lot more yet to come, so make sure you come back next week for round 2 of the Screen Chat Rocky Saga. And until then, remember, ain't nothing over till it's over.